You're listening to Deep South Dining on MPB Think Radio. Malcolm and Carol are not in studio today. In celebration of Women's History Month, we are sharing some clips from just a few of our past women guests. Like when Carol Palmer and Chef Enrika Williams sat down with Toni Tipton-Martin and Morgan Bolling about their cookbook, When Southern Women Cook.
We also want to welcome for the first time on Deep South Dining, Executive Editor of Creative Content for Cook's Country, also a cast member of the Cook's Country TV show, and a passionate Southern woman, especially barbecue and grilling woman, Morgan Bolling. Hey, Morgan.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, we're having a great time talking about the book, and it's so nice to finally get to meet you. Of course, I know you from watching you on television, but one of the things that I love most about the book is you are a barbecue person, a woman at the grill. You wrote the chapter on gender in barbecue. You want to talk a little bit about that, Enrika?
So I am not very good on the grill, but I appreciate people who master fire and meats and the whole ritual of barbecue. I am also a big fan of butchers and people who work with cooking large chunks of meat. And so my fascination with women as it relates to food, not only just as barbecue, but as butchers and pit masters and pit mistresses, is very, it's very fascinating to me because I grew up in West Point, Mississippi, which is northeastern Mississippi, and there were women that I knew, older women, that could handle and man a barbecue grill, a pit like none other. I don't know why I didn't just go for that. I was always, and I still am, a little intimidated by it because it seems like such a skill, such an art form, and it's like I don't want to even dabble in it unless I am incredibly proficient at it. So I think that anytime spotlight is on women when it comes to being barbecue pit masters, working with fire, I'm always excited to hear that because most of the times they're forgotten or they're not really mentioned or they're relegated to the sides. And
into the kitchen.
Or into the kitchen or the desserts, which is nothing wrong with that at all, because I love and I am a connoisseur of delicious barbecue sides. But just the fact that it's not a second thought, or it's not like a backup singer to the main attraction, that there's even a chapter in this book that mentions that. So I'm in a space now where I was just talking to a colleague about Ashley Hunter, and I was talking to him about, this pig picking and smoking and seeing the process of this whole hog. I think I was talking to Eddie Wright, actually, and I told him about the intimidation that I felt, and he was just like, you can do it. Start small and just concentrate on a small grill. And if you don't feel comfortable grilling, let's start some smoking. And I'm a smoker. I will smoke things, but open fire, flame, grilling, cold points and stuff. No, I'm not that good at that. So I'm wrapping all of that up to say is I think that's really fascinating that it's in this book, because I am in a space of learning and researching. I want to know about more women who work the fire. I want to know more about butchers and women who fabricate meat. Just on a national level, in a regional level, and a local level. Just what are they doing besides making banana pudding and the potato salad and baked beans with the ground meat in it?
So, Morgan, how did you start with the grill?
Yeah, so I feel like you're speaking to my soul right now. I'm like, this is exactly what I love talking about. So I could actually started because I moved. My theory on this is that I moved to New England and they were like, "You're the Southern girl working for a food magazine. You're going to develop recipes around barbecue." And it was sort of like they were like, "You'll know how to use a grill. You're from the South." And I mean, I grilled, but very recreationally, and I also loved barbecue, but recreationally as a consumer. And then at the Test Kitchen in Cook's Country, I started developing all our grill recipes. And similarly sort of went down this rabbit hole of like trying to understand it, trying to learn how to do it, trying to understand a lot of the women in the space because it is such a male dominated industry, and like finding stories like that. Like I love like reading about what they're doing at Barb's BQ in Texas. And then I know there's like Leanne Mueller, who passed away, but her restaurant's still La Barbecue is amazing. Her partner's keeping that going. And there are just so many interesting people doing stuff in this space. I mean, like, I do think it sort of like just evolved from me being passionate about barbecue and then getting to work on this book to get to like think about this as a concept and the gender piece here. I had a ton of fun writing that intro, but it was also very intimidating to write. A lot to say.
She's also being very humble in that we're building a grilling show around her for Cook's Country. So look for that at some point on a channel near you. But we have already shot some of it, and she is bringing that professionalism, cooking whole. Did you make a whole hog on the set? I don't remember.
I didn't, but I cook a whole hog every year, at least one a year. So, yeah. Like,
and this is not Julia's little sucklings, right? Julia had the little suckling pig in a roasting pan. It's a little different.
Yeah, these are like 8. Well, my spit can only hold 90 pounds is the max, but I can hold up to 90 pounds. So I do up to a 90-pound pig. I've done bigger ones when I was in North Carolina, but in Boston, I cap myself at 90-pound pigs.
So, how did this book start? I mean, how did you pick the 70 women? Yeah, tell us a little bit about the process.
Well, the process began when I came on board and I was bringing more of a journalist. My intention was to bring more journalism into the building and to Cook's Country, and was invited to come up with a book idea. And so Morgan and I were talking about it, and she will tell you more about her side of the equation, but she was having this experience, and I really was trying to push her to do a book associated with her work outside of the company and with women survivors. And the more that we talked about it, we realized that we had this area of commonality in the women and the food of the South, just mostly from bantering around ideas for how she should do a book was the way that it came about. And so I had this old list of iconic dishes that Natalie Dupree and I had worked on years ago, and gave it to Morgan and said, all right, you're the recipe expert here. Let's see what kind of recipes we have in the Cook's Country archive. And we would know whether we had enough recipes to fill a book. Did we need to bring in outside contributors? Who were going to be the voices that substantiated these recipes? What really does it mean to be an icon? What are the boundaries of the South? I mean, there were so many things to contemplate that we just started with the food at first, just to see what ATK and Cook's Country would yield, in terms of icons. And then the next step was to see which one of those had any kind of womanish history at all. And that was the first step, I think, in narrowing in on the recipes. So while she was doing that, I was going through that long Rolodex, deep Rolodex of mine, and really spending a lot of time thinking about those old gatherings, all of the time I've spent in the South, all of the conversations we had at gatherings of Les Dames or IACP or all of these places where women in the food world congregated, where, how many writers were there and what kind of unique stories had I heard snippets of over the years. And so then we sat together and put those two things together. So I'll let her tell you about the recipe side of that.
So we had a long list. We started going through the company archives to see what we already had recipes for from this list that Toni mentioned from her and Natalie. And I also just gathered all the Southern recipes we had in the company because like we were starting with mostly our own archival recipes. And we had over 600, which is a lot. So then we started looking at like the diversity within that too, of like everything from like, wanted to make sure we were telling a really nice story of what Southern food is and how it continues to evolve. So we're making sure we tried to hit as many populations as possible. And we also, like to Toni's point, we're looking for womanish stories. So we started eliminating ones that were very like male-centered stories. And then we also started looking at like, okay, so I have this huge spreadsheet that had like, okay, these ones are mostly from New Orleans and these ones are mostly from Texas, and sorting by that and being like, okay, we have 150 New Orleans recipes. That might be a little too many, but let's start eliminating. And so then we eventually got the list down to, actually, we got it down from company recipes. There are about 50 new recipes in this, so probably to 250 recipes. And then we picked some that we would develop internally at Cook's Country. And then we did work with some contributors for some recipes, especially things like we didn't think we had the knowledge or authority to speak on, and we wanted someone's specific voice or a recipe tied to a specific person, or just a culture we weren't that educated in. So we had people develop a few for that. But yeah, it was definitely like a lot of spreadsheeting, honestly, to get down to like our number of recipes and where we landed. And then, yeah, to Toni's point, we started, when she kind of gathered, we also worked with this woman who's a historical consultant, Casey Highsmith. She got her PhD in American Studies, but focusing specifically on women and food. And she helped us also with that list of women. And we started thinking like, okay, what story do we want to tell with each recipe? And then do we feel like we can tell that story, or do we want to have someone else tell that story specifically? And like, so we sort of like went through it and like paired them together in that way. And it was really fun. I think also just Toni, being who she is, was at a lot of different events and would have conversations with people and be like, oh, actually, do you want to tell this story, or is this a better fit? And like, yeah, a lot of puzzling, but it was very fun to get to do.
Yeah, it sounds like a jigsaw
so much fun
puzzle.
to have people. It was so much fun to have new people that I didn't have those storytelling experiences with, who were asking themselves the question like, well, what story should I tell? What would I tell? Ashley Christensen, we talked quite a bit about her various experiences. And is this a professional story? Is this about coming up in the restaurant, right? And if we knew we already had Vivian telling that story, we didn't need another restaurateur telling that story. So we dug a little bit deeper. And once the contributors realized that I wasn't looking for them to fit into a box, and that they could literally just be whoever they wanted to be, Ashley started telling me this great story in the back of an Uber one time. And I said, that's your story right there. That's the one I want. Can you please get that down on paper?
We'll be right back with another great guest on Deep South Dining.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
Both seasons of the 10-Minute Timeout are now available on a variety of podcasting apps. The mini podcast can be binged in a day and is perfect for those that just want a quick listen. Join me, Lacey Alexander, as I sit down with special guests, revisit major moments, and give a platform to the athletes and sports that shape Mississippi. Head over to mpbonline.org to give it a try.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission.
You're listening to Deep South Dining on MPB Think Radio. Leigh Bailey visited the show last fall to discuss the huge expansion to Salad Days Hydroponic Farm.
Welcome back to Deep South Dining right here on MPB Think Radio. Carol Palmer, Malcolm White, and Wilder Malcolm Webb is also in the studio this morning. And we have a fabulous guest, one of our favorites that we follow and keep up with and are so excited about good news that she has. Leigh Bailey joins us this morning from Salad Days. Welcome, Leigh.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Always great to have you.
Flora, Mississippi.
Yeah. So y'all had big news last week.
We did. We had a big groundbreaking ceremony that is celebrating our new project that's about to kick off. We're ready to start moving some dirt on a 65,000 square foot greenhouse facility.
Leigh.
It's a lot of greens.
I tried to just wrap my head around that because you have 20,000 feet now, right?
A little less, like 18,000. Yeah.
I cannot imagine anything bigger than what you already have.
It's going to be about 3 times the growing space that we have currently. It'll be about an acre of the growing area, and then some of it, the extra square footage, is a support space of seating and packaging and coolers and all of that. But in a 3 times the space, we expect to produce 7 to 8 times the amount of product, just because of the efficiencies that are going in. There will be automation, conveyor belts, things that people are doing, and we'll still have plenty of people around, but the things that we can save steps and time, and people that are now currently carrying in totes of lettuce, picking by hand, carrying them into the packing room, packing by hand, a lot of that will be able to be saved time and steps by riding it in on a conveyor belt.
So this is hydroponic lettuce, and kind of explain the mechanics of hydroponics.
So hydroponics is growing without soil. So it's in water, and all of your nutrients are dissolved in the water. So the plants are getting exactly what they want delivered to their root system 24/7. So when you have a plant in the ground in the dirt, the roots have to really stretch out and look for the nutrients, and that's why you get a much bigger root ball, and you're also not as efficient with your use of your fertilizer and your water, because a lot of it runs off and the plant can't use it. But with this very efficient system of delivering exactly what that plant wants to its roots every minute of the day, it can grow quickly and very uniformly, and it's very sustainable because you're using a lot less water, a lot less fertilizer, and you're taking up very few amount of acres to do. We can do, in our 18,000 square foot facility, we estimate that we're producing about 6 acres worth of outdoor. It's really, it's the thing of the future. It's the way to cheat Mother Nature out of coming and ruining all your crops. And when you have a roof over your head, it really helps, and it's, it cuts down on any kind of pathogens and wild animals being in your crops, and just the food safety is much, much, much better, and then you just don't have the wild swings in the weather problems. And
it's almost like you're domesticating farming.
It is.
Weird. It is. With this enormous expansion, you must have an ever-expanding market. I mean, talk a little bit about the growth of your, I guess it's wholesale business. You're not really a retail business.
We're not a retail business. We have too many heads of lettuce coming out of there every week to be able to do it one by one. It's right now there are 27,000 heads of lettuce in the greenhouse at all times, at different ages. And hello to my crew that's packing and picking for me this morning while I'm here. But we just can't. We have to sell them in bulk, and we do package for retail that goes into fruit stands, grocery stores. It's all around the metro area. You can go to our website, and there's a little store finder if you want to buy just a head of lettuce. But mostly it's food service packed, and it's going into the restaurant world. And we have several great distributors, but we've been being contacted for years from other big distributors. I mean, Kroger is one, and Cisco, and AWG, who's supplies a lot of grocery stores, and none of those kind of customers want to buy enough for one store or one. They want 20 stores or 40 stores or 200 stores. So we've been turning people away for years, and it just didn't make sense to work as hard as we work and to produce a great product that is scalable. It's just we wish we were 20 years younger, but we're not. So the old dogs are learning new tricks, and we're just moving on.
Well, there's a lot going on in Flora besides what you are announcing. So can you talk a little bit about the Flora renaissance, I guess?
The Flora food scene is just growing all the time. We have great restaurants. We have great farmers, producers. In fact, I brought a little sample salad for y'all today. This had the extra added challenge of figuring out what is a breakfast salad. And if you Google breakfast salad, there are actually quite a number of recipes. I had to leave the egg off. It wanted a soft-boiled or runny fried egg on the top. And I just couldn't figure out how I was going to get here with that in any good form. So we stopped short of the egg. But I brought some Flora ingredients. I've got Flora Butcher Applewood bacon on the salad. I've got
it's a Flora breakfast salad.
It's a Flora breakfast salad, and it's got I want to know if you've ever heard of a North Georgia candy roaster squash.
No, but I'm excited to learn.
So this is from Two Dogs?
This is from Two Dog Farms, and if you've never seen one, I should have brought a whole one. It's about this long, about
24 inches.
At least. Some of them bigger. They look like a torpedo. They're pointed on one end. They're a beautiful kind of apricot color, and then the ends are a green, like they've been dipped in green paint. They are exquisitely made squash, and they're somewhere between, I think they're sweeter than an acorn or a butternut, somewhere between a pumpkin and a butternut and a sweet potato. So they're orange flesh, sweet, nutty. So I roasted up some candy roaster, and that's going to be on the salad. And we've got cinnamon toast croutons and a maple vinaigrette.
I'm chewing, Carol.
Malcolm,
I'm having salad.
Have you run into one of the croutons yet?
Yes, head on.
I'm holding my salad up for the camera. Leigh said that she had to slap Jamie's hands. He was in the croutons last night.
Oh, I bet he was.
They're easily snackable. I think I can make another batch of those.
Well, talk to us. We'll talk lettuce. Talk to us about the croutons.
Okay, the croutons are simple. Gambino's bread cubed up, and then I did just a melted butter, cinnamon, sugar, and tossed them all, and then toasted them up in the oven. And that Gambino's just gets so good and just crispy, and it's
that squash.
The squash,
it's like a butternut.
It's creamy. It's really
okay. The name of it again?
North Georgia Candy Roaster, and it is an heirloom squash from the Cherokee Nation.
Wow.
And the seeds are so that they value them so much that because the shelf life of these things, when you pick one, it'll last 6 months, just room temperature in your house. And so the Cherokee Nation was served well by these squash during the winter when they needed something to eat and hearty and filling, and so they still save these seeds, and it's very, very valued crop, but kind of little known. I mean, I really want you to look up a picture of these squash because you just won't believe what it looks like. But they are available at the Two Dog Farm store right now. So
well, they're fabulous.
They have wonderful heirloom products.
They do.
We did a lot of their okra this summer, all different varieties. The
reds and the candy roaster also makes a fine pie. Okay. I sub it in for my sweet potato, and it's a delicious pie.
I'm just all about the breakfast salad.
This is fine. Look,
and I feel like we're crunching too much. But
how would you feel about an egg being on there?
Ooh,
I feel strongly pro.
I
I'd be for it.
Too, although I'm happy just like it is.
I think it would be an interesting ad with that yolk, and I think it would be good. But
And a little warmth wouldn't hurt it.
So, Leigh,
Delicious.
what for you? How do you make the perfect salad? I mean, this is so fluffy, and I mean,
it all starts with the lettuce, of course. You're fighting a losing battle if you're buying a bag of cut lettuce that came 3,000 miles in a truck. So start with good lettuce. That's number one. Always toss your dressing on there. Never blob it on top. It's got to be evenly distributed. These are in my book as the salad queen.
This is the book I want to know. I want to read.
I have to, as you can imagine, anytime we're invited to go to someone's house for dinner or to anything where it's a bring something, you can imagine what I am always assigned. So, and I feel like I should have a big repertoire. So I go back and forth from sweet and savory, and always like to have a nut. I love to have a little fruit in there, but if I go the savory route with tomatoes and cucumbers and bell peppers and that stuff, I don't want the fruit. It kind of freaks me out to have a cranberry next to a cherry tomato. I don't know why, but that's just me. But it's...
Freaks you out to have a cranberry next to a cherry tomato.
I just don't like fruit and vegetables. I mean, but that's a vegetable, so I guess that doesn't really make sense.
We got squash over here with
the squash has some sweetness to it.
Some vegetables are different than others, I guess, in my...
Well, and this lettuce is, in these beautiful little bite-sized pieces. So you tear.
Well,
do you tear or cut?
I actually cut that. Our lettuce is the growth habits of the varieties that you're eating the spring mix right now. So that's got some red oak leaf and it's got some green sweet crisp in there, and they grow in smaller leaves. So it's not giant leaves like a green leaf or a bib, they're frilly little small leaves. So the chefs really like them when they're making their salads from our big box of lettuce they get in. They can just cut the root off. I'll go back and say we do sell everything with the root still attached. And we take off most of the root, but we leave about an inch of root on each head of lettuce, which increases your shelf life and your refrigerator shelf life, I need to add. Because some people think when I say that, it's just on the counter. But it does need to be refrigerated. But easily one of our heads of lettuce is good for 2 weeks and probably a lot longer than that. It looks just the same.
Together through the years, together in the future. MPB, your stories, our mission.
What's happening at the Mississippi Legislature? Tune in to MPB's At Issue for an inside look at the legislative session, interviews with legislators, and perspectives from both sides of the aisle. I'm your host, Wilson Stribling. At Issue airs every Friday night at 6:30 on MPB Think Radio throughout the session. You can also subscribe to the MPB At Issue podcast and catch At Issue videos on YouTube and at mpbonline.org. MPB's At Issue. Tune in, Mississippi.
Hello, I'm Desiree Frazier, host of the award-winning news program, Mississippi Edition. We bring you conversations about the latest news from across the Magnolia State. Whether it's politics, healthcare, or education, you'll hear in-depth discussions on issues that matter to you. So join us each weekday morning at 8:30 on MPB Think Radio, or download the podcast, listen through the app, and online.
This is Deep South Dining on MPB Think Radio. Wrapping up today's Women's History Month episode is Sherry Castle.
Malcolm and I both really like the show. Just
great.
A few of the things that I really like. First of all, I like the length of it. I mean, It's like a 30-minute, 25-minute show, but I really feel like in that time, you are a great explainer.
Thank you.
It doesn't feel feel rushed at all.
No.
But it's just the right amount of time, and you do things thoroughly. You're not trying to do 20 things in one session.
Yeah, and a
well,
great example.
I appreciate that because it does. We do cram an awful lot in those 26 minutes.
It feels thorough.
Yeah, a great example was the episode with the tomato seed guru.
Yes.
And I thought, how is she going to wrap this up? Because this guy began to explain how to plant seeds and the whole process. And I thought, this guy, I don't know how she's going to wrap him up. But I mean, just as he got to the place where the seeds were in the little containers and the plastic was applied, and you said, oh, like a greenhouse. And then it was like, and that's how you plant tomatoes. It was beautiful.
Well, thank you. Sometimes those are happy accidents, but I think I don't know if it's just me or my family or being from mountains or something, but we can talk to a fence post and get a good time out of it. I really go into these. We don't rehearse. We don't have a script. I'm just hanging out and chatting with people and asking things that I'm curious about, with the hopes that the viewers will also be curious, and it works out, and we're very lucky about that.
Well, I really loved the episode with John Fleer on this season.
Yes.
What was it called? Something about mushrooms?
It was about mushrooms. So
but the name of it was
the recipe he picked, rather, that our good buddy Fleer picked, was called Merkel.
Merkel
pie. And even as a lifelong mountain person, I had never heard that particular nickname for morel mushrooms, which is, a very popular, delicious mushroom that people forage in the spring. And when he was the force and the brilliant chef at Blackberry Farm, one of his kitchen workers made him this recipe that was from his family. They're in the mountains of East Tennessee. And it's essentially a shepherd's pie, but instead of ground beef, it's these beautifully cooked mushrooms, morels, with a mashed potato crust on the top. And it was wonderful. Wow. It taught me something I had never had not known that word or had that dish, and it's that sense of place that a good recipe will give you, that like a culinary GPS. You take a bite and you know where you are.
Well, you and John Fleer have both done so much to promote Appalachian cooking and to help people discover it. And John was at Blackberry Farm for many years, and with his Foothills Cuisine, brought that to the table, and now as a restaurant owner in Asheville. And it just made me so happy to see the two of you, who probably know as much or more about Appalachian food than most chefs in North Carolina, standing there together and doing this. And what a marvelous contribution both of you've made.
Well, thank you. That was, all of the cook-alongs are fun for me, but some of them are truly joyful. And to get to hang out with my buddy John Fleer, who I adore as a person, admire deeply for all he's done for Appalachian food, all of his good works in the community, the Equal Plates Project, all the things that he does. Plus, we're genuine friends. I wish you all could have seen, because we were actually at his house for about 5 or 6 hours to edit down to those 5 or 6 delicious minutes. The outtakes were priceless. We just cut a fool and had the best old time. And I think that the joy in the process of what we're doing, our deep affection for the land and the place and the mountains and those people, I think that comes through in what we wound up doing, because we had a wonderful time together.
Well, now I remember the name of the episode that I was searching for. It was Mushrooms Are Having a Moment.
Mushrooms are having a moment. They've always been here. They're older than humanity. But in recent years, people are discovering mushrooms. We're foraging a little more. We're finding more beautifully farmed mushrooms in our stores and in our farmers markets. We're discovering how good they are for us, how versatile. Mushrooms are definitely having a moment.
So the TV show the key ingredient. Is this the third season that you're in?
Yes, it is. The way we count them at and I'm not a PBS North Carolina employee. I do the show for them, but it is produced and distributed by PBS North Carolina. The way we count it, it's season 3, but the way that it is presented to the United States through distribution, it's season 2, because they combined our first 2 as a bundle and then our third one as a standalone. So by my count, it's 3, but for some people, it's 2.
Okay. And Key Ingredient airs on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. on MPB television, and MPB sustainers can watch anytime on PBS Passport. So for those of us who are local, who are listeners, well, of course, we think our listeners are global, and we know that they are.
Sherry, our listeners are now global.
I love that. I love that. The show can be too. Streaming is a wonderful thing for getting the word out, literally.
Well, and you're spreading the gospel of Appalachia all over the world too. I can tell you that many people here have not heard of ramps. And the episode where you actually cut and hunted ramps, and John Flair had those in his dish. I mean, you're teaching us a lot about ingredients.
Well, I'm hoping to, because occasionally we will do something very specific like ramps or something, but generally I'm trying to pick ingredients that if you may not be able to find it in exactly the form that we did, but there's going to be something equivalent wherever our viewers are across the country or around the world. And because I want people to give more thought to where things come from and to maybe explore their own backyard rather than just the one neon lit aisle of their grocery store. And I understand that not everyone has the same access and that there's all sorts of issues tied up in that, but I do believe there's lots of good local food to be found, and I want to make people curious and enthusiastic about that.
What would you say are some good substitutes for ramps if someone wanted to make a ramp dish without?
Well, I would mix a combination of green onions or scallions with a little bit of garlic, because to hear the folklore behind ramp, you would think it was the most pungent thing in the world, that the paint will slide off the walls and everything. It's really not that pungent. It is in the allium family, which is the onion family, more or less, and there is a bit of garliciness to it, but it will not make your eyes water. So I would do a cross between scallions with a little good fresh garlic put in.
Right. You heard it here on Deep South Dining.
Indeed,
now.
You did.
One of the comments from that show, which I highly recommend to anybody, you were talking about, foraging for ramps and for morels, and you said ingredients that grow at the same time, that appear like the morels and at the same time, naturally should go well together. Nature gave them to us at exactly the same time. And it was just so beautiful to see this skillet full of mushrooms and other wild greens. And what a great point.
Because I understand that some people, depending on their comfort level of cooking or even as curious eaters, sometimes don't really know where to begin with maybe pairing flavors or making substitutions. So that little adage, what grows together goes together, can serve you year round. I mean, think about basil and tomatoes and ramps and morels, or sweet potatoes and pecans. There is a seasonality to things, and Mother Nature is doing her dead level best to make us pay attention and take advantage of that. And it's a really pretty simple starting point for putting things together.
Okay, Malcolm, forevermore we will remember what grows together goes together.
And I loved
we
all
need
three
t-shirts,
of those.
Don't we?
All three of those examples: basil and tomatoes, pecans.
And sweet potatoes.
And what was the third one? That was another good one.
Ramps and morel
mushrooms.
Of course, that's what led us to this. So, Sherry, I'm curious about your thought about North Carolina and North Carolina's place in the Southern food canon and the country and the globe, because you live and work and sort of represent North Carolina. Where is North Carolina's place? What is unique and what is important about North Carolina and the cuisine and the foods there?
Well, North Carolina is a larger state than a lot of people realize. If you start out on the Outer Banks, our storied barrier islands out on the Atlantic Ocean, one of the first places you hit, if you leave and come toward North America, one of the first places you're going to get to are our Outer Banks, and go all the way to the tip far end of the Blue Ridge Mountains where I'm from, that is about a 17-hour drive. It is a long way. So the state's larger than you think. It also is in some ways 3 states, or at least 3 very distinct geological regions in one. You've got the mountains,
right.
And as we know, our Appalachian Mountains, although they can appear to be in the American South on a map, we're really not from around here because of the elevation and the different climate and so forth. That part of North Carolina actually has a growing season and a tradition that's much more like New England. And then you've got the coastal area. You've got all the fishing. You've got all the things that are down there, that, you know, the intercoastal waterways, the ocean and the Outer Banks and so forth. And so that's very coastal, like you might get in Florida or the low country of Georgia and South Carolina, or even part of the Gulf Coast. And then you've got the middle, what we often call the Piedmont or the Sandhills. And that's completely different from both the mountains and the ocean. So even though collectively North Carolina's one state, it's really a number of different smaller growing zones that are very different from one another. And because of that, we have a lot of different things that we can contribute to the lexicon of what is Southern and even American. And there are people in North Carolina that are very proud of their foodways and have no idea what people on the other part of the state are doing. So I think that you know, we've got those regions and those identities and those practices and ways. And then also, because of our universities and our high-tech sector and so forth, we have a lot of folks moving to North Carolina. I think it's been in the top 5 states for people moving from elsewhere in recent years, both for jobs or to retire here for our, you know, comparatively milder climate, certainly milder than snowbird, you know, than snowy country, and not quite as deeply hot and humid as some of the other parts of the South. We're sort of a temperate zone in many ways, that we have our ways that we've had, and then we've got the new ways that people that are choosing to move here are bringing. And, you know, it's a cliche, but it's true. We're kind of a melting pot of things. We're having things that are coming together, and then we have those strong roots that we're still persevering with.
Yeah, I was actually, when you were explaining, I was thinking, it's not a melting pot there, it's a boiling pot, because it's happening really fast, and people are coming
really fast
from lots of places, and I'm sure there's some push and pull with the locals about, you know, it's like Californians moving to Texas, and there's this push and pull of the merging of these different peoples. I'm sure that's going on in North Carolina now a lot.
It is going on a whole lot. And the thing is that I try to hold space for both things. I believe that hanging on to our local food traditions, whether we're in North Carolina or Mississippi or Utah, whatever, I think that there is great power and value in traditions and in local flavors and, you know, local cultivars of things. Your kind of field pea you're going to find, or your kind of heirloom apple you're going to find. But we also need to understand that there will always be evolving ways for people to use those local ingredients in those local ways. And to me, that's where kind of the beauty is for people that can shine fresh light on things we have always eaten. To me, that's just the genius of where we can be on a good day with Southern food and with American food.
Well, that is, you know, a great example of what you're talking about is one of your recent shows that was called Turning Over a New Collard Leaf, where you actually take, you know, the Southern collard green and you're putting it with curry, a green curry.
Yeah, with a coconut green curry thing. Exactly. And, you know, it, when I try to give all the recipes in the show careful consideration, but on some things where you have something as ubiquitous as a collard, people have very strong feelings about collards. Either this is the only way to make them, or you could not pay me to eat one. I wanted to give people a fresh way of considering something that is, we were just cooking collards, but we weren't cooking them in pot liquor. Not that I don't love pot liquor. This is not denigrating pot liquor. But to do something quick in a pan with coconut milk and green curry and toasted spices, that could be a real aha moment for some people that will get them to try something that they thought they had written off.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, let's talk about barbecue.
Can't we just talk about religion and politics instead?
Well,
It'll be less controversial.
It's coming. It's coming.
When she was talking about those regions, you were just kind of in your mind.
We're going to talk about barbecue in a minute. So North Carolina has a distinctive barbecue style, as does Alabama and parts of Tennessee and Texas and South Carolina, and there's different kinds of sauces and stuff. So make the case for North Carolina barbecue and where you think it lives.
I have a hat. Had I known, I could have had my hat on. It is a drawing of the outline of the shape of North Carolina with a diagonal slash right in the middle. And because Eastern North Carolina barbecue has a very distinctive saucing or mopping style, and then there's Western. Very broadly speaking, well, first of all, let's start about what it has in common. Okay. North Carolina barbecue is pork barbecue. It's not going to be beef. It's not going to be mutton. It's not even the glorious chicken of North Alabama. It is a pork-based thing, and it is generally whole hog barbecue. It's not just the hams like you get in, East Tennessee and so forth. But in the eastern part of the state, any saucing is a very peppery, very bold and pungent vinegar-based mop and sauce. On the other side of that slash, Western North Carolina, again, a kind of a bold sauce, but has some element of tomato in it, often some ketchup for a tiny bit of balancing sweetness. And people tend to be imprinted in their youth liking one kind or the other, and there are people that will happily accept both, and there are some people's like, no, that's just not how it's made. And now here's the odd thing, even as a lifelong North Carolinian, because my family lived right on the North Carolina-Tennessee state line. To tell you how much on, my grandparents' house was in North Carolina, and just about all their cows lived in Tennessee. It literally, the state line was right at the top of the hill behind the house. We would go to East Tennessee for barbecue because that was a closer drive for us. So I didn't really get into the whole nitty-gritty of North Carolina barbecue till I came to college and attended pig picking. So I'm a little more ecumenical in my barbecue than some people, but that's our barbecue. Always pig, almost always whole hog, either vinegar based or that vinegary sauce mitigated, balanced with a little bit of tomato.
Well, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in that because I went to college right at the South Carolina, North Carolina border. Well, in Spartanburg, about 20 miles in. I was forever imprinted with mustard sauce.
Mustard sauce. I knew you were going to say that because
I love it.
South Carolinians, I have said with great affection and a little tongue in cheek, but not entirely, they put mustard in their Cheerios. They will put yellow mustard in their potato salad, their deviled eggs, their barbecue sauce.
You betcha.
And again, I have had really good mustard-based barbecue sauce, but if I were to rank order them, it would not be at the top of my list.
Well, it's that imprint that you're talking about.
Exactly.
You get imprinted with
Mm-hmm.
what you had. And, it used to be that I would carry the mustard sauce home, in my suitcase or stop in by. Now, it's pretty ubiquitous,
Yeah.
and you can find it in
is.
specialty stores every now and then.
Even
a
Sacred Ground, a new barbecue place here that's basically a Texas barbecue style in Pocahontas, Mississippi. They have 3 sauces. They have a traditional red with vinegar, they have the mustard, and they have the Alabama white. And it seems like more and more and more people want to offer this variety.
Exactly. You know, like some restaurants have like an array of hot sauces or something, but I
same.
think that playing with sauces, you know, that people like to do, they like to doctor their own plate.
Right.
You know, they may take one thing, but, you know, with other condiments or with the barbecue sauce stuff, people like to dib and dab their little thing. Now, I lived in Alabama for about 11 minutes one time, and I had never experienced Alabama white sauce until that. And now I adore the stuff. I mean, I absolutely adore it. But I personally want it on smoked chicken, not on anything
me
porky
too.
or anything like that. But, you know, there is a world of sauces out there. I have found, we're talking about the mustard being pretty ubiquitous, it's true. When I go to other places, I try to go to a grocery store or a farmer's market. I think that's how you really know what's going on in a place, is see where they're buying their groceries. And there is this phenomenon where they call something Carolina, which is a huge, pretty useless term, because there's 2 states and different regions within them and so forth. But I have found that on the national grocery store shelf, something called Carolina barbecue sauce almost always has some element of mustard in it.
Interesting.
Deep South Dining is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting's Think Radio and is funded by generous contributions from listeners like you. Stay tuned for Now You're Talking with Marshall Ramsey and Southern Remedy at 11. And join us next Monday for more Deep South Dining on MPB Think Radio.